Plague Road looks interesting. Checking out the front cover, the spooky Tim Burton-esque art style is enough to get you excited. An awesome-looking plague doctor, revolver in hand, lets you know that you're about to embark on an adventure full of death and violence. You read the description, noting the promise of engaging strategy RPG combat, and your mouth moistens as you think of other incredible experiences like Final Fantasy Tactics and South Park: The Fractured Butthole. You notice that the game is one of the best-selling titles on the Switch, joining the company of such acclaimed indie titles as Stardew Valley, Undertale, and Celeste. You check the price and are blown away that the game, normally priced at $15, is often on sale for only $1 or less on the Switch eShop. Is this deal too good to be true, you ask? You happily buy the game and think of all the amazing fun you're about to have, but then you dig into the title. You see the great art style actually in movement, no longer hampered by still photos. You fight a battle, realizing that it meets only the bare minimum of what constitutes as a strategy RPG. That price, you realize, wasn't a gift, but a warning, a sign alerting players that this road that they are about to travel down is hazardous. It's slippery when wet, with sudden dangerous turns and falling rocks. And by the end of it, you realize that instead of driving down Plague Road, you should have just stayed home and read a book. This is Trash or Treasure, the video series where I examine lesser-known games, or those that have fallen from grace, in order to determine if they are indeed worth adding to your video game collection, or if they're rubbish, only worth, well, dumping into a trash can. Let's start with the graphics, because for many it's likely what attracted them to the game in the first place. From still photos, the art style is definitely appealing. It easily calls to mind a type of medieval Beetlejuice, with bizarre shapes and characters mixed alongside unusual colors to craft an eerie picture. I can see how this will draw many in, although the tint of yellow used throughout the game makes me think of vomit, but perhaps that's just me. Maybe that's because I've actually played the game, but I digress. While the art is definitely captivating, it has a lot of problems. For example, throughout the game, the player will explore 4 different areas on their quest to reach the center of the city. Here's a look at the first section, the plains, and then the second, the forest. Next is the city walls. Starting to see a pattern? There's virtually no difference between any of these areas aside from the enemies. Only the final section, the city itself, looks different, but it's far too little, too late. By this point, the rest of the game's corrosiveness has latched its claws upon you like the plague itself, and no change of scenery will keep you from seeing the horridness festering underneath. Moving on to the characters, they are undeniably rich in color and detail. The Doctor himself reminds me of some of the action figures I used to play with growing up, with long limbs, cool weaponry, and a stance indicating that he's ready for a fight. The monsters that the player faces, too, look imposing, full of power and ferocity and a vile hunger. It's not hard to imagine them moving about with dangerous speed, or swinging their brutal arms with the force to level a building. But then we set the whole thing in motion. Well, just look at it. This is junior grade animation at its best. I would say that they look like paper dolls that have come to life, but that would indicate that it actually looks somewhat good. Limbs move with an amateur touch, with minimal effort and animation. It all has an early 2000s flash look to it. That's not a good thing to say about a video game made in 2017, even if it's an indie title. Next, let's look at the story. Plague Road is set in an unnamed city that has been overtaken by disease. This illness has turned the residents of the city and the surrounding countryside into vicious monsters, who live only to feast on the blood of what few survivors there are left. As a lone plague doctor, the player must make their way from an abandoned farm that the doctor has made his base to the city center, where the disease can be eradicated. There's certainly promise here, but it's an empty promise. Like when you said you'd pay your friend back for that piece of gum that you borrowed. For a story that begins with some intrigue, it never develops more than a simple motive to push the player towards a goal, and as an RPG, it's a hollow mess. There are virtually no quests, no lore to be uncovered, and what dialogue is there only serves to state the obvious. Yeah, I know there's a plague killing people. I read the game's title before I started it. There are no twists in the plot, no real explanations for the plague terrorizing the world. I mean, they didn't even bother to name the city that the game takes place in, so what do you expect? Controversial video game critic Jim Sterling provides the only voice dialogue in the game as its narrator, but this isn't any saving grace. Sterling has a great voice for narration. He is a popular YouTuber after all, not to mention he's wonderfully British, but a voice is only as good as the material given, and that material stinks. Instead of offering anything of interest, like the inner thoughts of our protagonist, or history of the city before the plague, or any explanation as to what the plague really is, Sterling simply prattles about stuff that doesn't matter in a lyrical manner. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe it was written so as to steer our mind from the game we're playing and towards a much more interesting endeavor, like watching paint dry. That leads us to the boring gameplay. Developer Arcade Distillery has set out to craft a roguelike strategy RPG. These types of games are normally complex, require loads of thought to complete, and are as engaging as they are challenging. Plague Road is none of these. Most all roguelike games consist of a great deal of randomly generated material, and for better or worse, Plague Road actually nails this part. When you enter any of the 4 areas to explore, the map is procedurally generated, and will change every time you come back to them. This can make each journey through any of the areas a fresh take for players. Not just the map, but everything else is random too. Enemy locations change, treasure is placed in new locations, and the exit to the next area is hidden in different spots as well. Fans of roguelike games like Rogue Legacy may get excited for this, and it's easy to get hyped for what the game promises, but this whole concept just comes up short. For starters, exploring each and every map in full will reward you with essentially nothing. There is no gear to collect, no special items to add to your arsenal, or even bonus collectibles that can unlock cool secrets. There are only 2 items in the entire game, which are potions that restore health or increase stamina, which is used for your abilities. And that's it. You can find these in chests that are scattered about, but you will quickly fill up your inventory space and thus ignore chests altogether. Battles, too, are practically meaningless. Characters earn no experience like in other RPGs, and foes never drop any treasure to collect. Enemies will leave behind herbs, which the player can then use to craft into potions at the main base, but there's such an abundance of potions and chests littered throughout the game that I never had to craft new ones. So because battles are worthless, you want to avoid them at all costs so as not to lose precious health. This results in the entire experience consisting of running from one door to another, attempting to outrun enemies that are faster than you in search of an exit. The only reason to explore areas more than once is to acquire survivors, which are essential to completing this journey. While traversing the road, the player will come across hooded figures that they can then rescue and send back to the farm. Returning to the farm will reveal the class and stats of the rescued survivor, and it is up to the player to determine if they want that survivor to join their combat team or to go to work in one of the buildings at the base. There are some interesting classes for survivors. Peasants have some middle-of-the-ground stats and can only use a standard melee attack. Nurses are your medics and can heal your characters or stab enemies with a weak attack up close. The engineer is a bit of a tank. They generally can't move great distances, but have a lot of health and can hit for heavy damage either up close or from afar. The soldier is a very diverse class and uses a thrower to hit enemies with elemental damage. I love to use ice to freeze an enemy in place and force them to lose a turn. Finally, we have the witch, which is the game's mage class, and she can use ranged magic attacks to wear down your foes. Like the soldier, her ice attacks can freeze enemies. That's probably the best thing to use. And now's probably a good time to also talk about the Doctor himself. He is a unique class, and it's the only one that gets stronger as the game goes on. The The Doctor begins with some horrid stats, and players that aren't careful will surely meet their end if they rely on him at all. Upgrading the Doctor makes him a powerful character, however, with a vicious melee attack and a ranged shot that can hit enemies twice in a row. Aside from that, though, he isn't very special. He cannot heal without potions, despite being a Doctor, nor does he have any attacks that hit multiple targets. He is, by and large, average. The only way to improve one of your characters is to upgrade the building for that class back in the farm. This is done by having a survivor work the building and leveling it up. Putting survivors to work on the farm is another concept that sounds good on paper, but it's just handled poorly. While any class of survivor can work at any building, getting the appropriate class of survivor will boost the level of a building much more significantly. Plague Road makes it extremely obvious as to which class goes with which building. The peasant, for instance, should work the farmland, the nurse and the clinic, and the witch in the witch's tower. When games remove all the thinking from the equation, it doesn't become fun, it becomes soulless and boring. It's simple matching, like sorting things simply by color. What's more is that these buildings only offer minor advantages to the survivors once you've leveled them up. Remember when I said that stats of a survivor are revealed once you get to the farm? Save for the Doctor, who gets minor increases when you level up any building, the stats you get at the beginning will never change. A low-level soldier, for example, will never increase in skill no matter how many battles he fights in. Increasing the barracks for the soldier only unlocks abilities that he can then be taught. Survivors come with one random ability from the start. You can learn an additional ability once unlocked from their building, but you can never unlearn the original ability. Thus, finding survivors is like a spin of the roulette wheel. To win at Plague Road, you don't have to grind for levels, but hope that you find a max level survivor with a good starting ability, and then you're set. Once this has been done, well, the game's a breeze. This leads me to combat, the meat of the game. Meat that's undercooked, essentially served raw, and will give you diarrhea if ingested in large amounts. Enemies wander the road and will chase you upon sight, and touching them will send you into a fight onto a grid battlefield. The first problem is attempting to avoid an enemy on the main field. There's no traps to use to hinder a pursuing enemy. There are no winding corners to lose them in, or hiding areas to get them off your trail, or stealth options whatsoever. You simply rush past them and hope to God that they don't catch you. Once they do catch you, you realize that there's a major delay in when you actually go to battle. Your character will stop moving, the words "to battle" will flash on the screen, and all enemies still on the screen will converge on you. They don't join in on the battle in progress whatsoever. Oh no, that would be too easy. Instead, when 2 or 3 foes are chasing you when you go into battle, it would just swarm around our helpless Doctor, ready to initiate battle after battle after battle until they've all been defeated. It's cheap, it's not fair, it's not fun, and it makes an annoying system even more frustrating the longer the game goes on. Combat itself tries hard to be a strategy RPG. And by trying hard, I mean that the developers slapped on a grid-based arena and called it a day. In most strategy games, the grid indicates the flow of battle. It determines when characters attack, what enemies are attacked, and the methods in which they're disposed of. Players often try to hit enemies from behind to score critical hits and earn accuracy bonuses. They allow baddies to bunch up before using an area of attack ability to hit multiple foes at once. They use abilities that hit every enemy on the same line as a character, or is located diagonally from them, or 2 spaces from them, or any other combination one can imagine. Those are the traits of good strategy games, and Plague Road is not one of those games. In Plague Road, a character cannot miss an attack regardless of where or how they are attacking. There is no incentive to attack an enemy from the side, or from behind, or while staring at a foe directly in his eyes. There is also no area of attack abilities. You either hit a single enemy, or you attack every single foe that's in battle, and that's it. There's no in-between. The best strategy is thus loading up on characters with attack all spells and let them level the competition from the back of the map. Unfortunately, they won't be safe for long, as with just 2 moves nearly every character can move to any space on the map that they wish. This would be like a pawn in a game of chess, being able to cover the entire board in just 2 moves. This eliminates any real need to strategically place your characters on the battlefield. Plague Road has no reason to be a strategy RPG, and I think it would benefit immensely if it was just standard turn-based. At least then, the no missing thing would make somewhat more sense, however small that is. Skills that hit one or all would also be more beneficial, as there aren't any area of attack abilities in the game anyway. Because arenas are small as it is, traditional combat would eliminate the very few times distance or positioning prevents you from acting. In short, if you're going to make a strategy RPG, make sure to take advantage of tactical elements. Don't just slap it on there with little thought and think that that makes a good game. Music in Plague Road is just about as soulless as an abandoned city after a disease ravages its citizens. While the title screen music is at least whimsical in the way a Danny Elfman score might be, when you're actually playing the game, there are no melodies to hold your interest. Exploring and battling share the same music, which is a low, droning, atmospheric sound that neither sounds good, nor is it interesting. I can appreciate that the composer was attempting to create a haunting tune to hammer home the fact that this was once a lively world made empty due to death, and that horrors may lurk around any corner, but it just doesn't work. What's more, battles that plod around are only made even more tedious when the music doesn't convey any sense of urgency, or energy, or action. Plague Road is an absolute mess. I wanted to enjoy it. I really did. I thought the art style was appealing, the concept compelling, and I was ready to dive into a good strategy RPG. That wasn't delivered here. The art style collapses when you see it in motion, the story is non-existent, and both the strategy and RPG elements are barely there. As interesting as this game may look, and as cheap as it gets, that you think that maybe the low price might justify the experience, avoid the signs and don't go down Plague Road. Anyway, here's Wonderwall.